In the elder ages, when the world was young, elves and dwarfs lived in peace and prosperity. Dwarfs are great craftsmen, lords of the underdeeps, artificers beyond compare. Elves are peerless mages, masters of the dragons, creatures of the sky and air. During the time of High King Snorri Whitebeard and Prince Malekith, those two great races were at the pinnacle of their strength. But such power and dominion could not last. Fell forces now gather against elves and dwarfs. Malekith, embittered by his maiming in the flame of Azurian, seeks to destroy them both, but still darker powers are also at work. Already strained, disharmony sours relations between them, until only enmity remains. Treachery is inevitable, a terrible act that can only result in one outcome: war.
Long ago, before the time of Sigmar and Jarls Le Breton, during their age of discovery, the High Elves had allied with many races, among them the Dwarfs. Already a great civilization when they first made contact with the Azure, the combination of cultures increased the stature of both races in tandem. Dwarfs were well versed in the secrets of ancient runes and made the finest weapons in the world, of which they gifted many to the princes and dragon lords of the Azure. The elves taught the dwarves how to enchant items on their own, and of arts, such as literature and poetry. Trade between the races flourished. Elven silk and steel was much valued by the Dawi, and dwarf armor, weaponry, and alcohol became a common sight in Ulthuan. The fortress Sith Rionask Namish Shathir was established at the mouth of what is now the River Reich, present-day Marienburg, and other colonies, such as the mighty city of Toralessi, present-day Longueuil in Bretonnia, were also founded. In the Age of Strife, and the tragic civil war called the Sundering, the Phoenix King Kellador I steered the High Elves through this time of turbulence, after the murder of the previous king Belshazzar by Malekith, the son of the first king Anarion. However, as long as Malekith and his followers still lived, there could be no peace. After his defeat at the marches of Malador and the exile of the Dark Elves to the cold land of Naggaroth, the Witch King hatched a plan, creating a spark that would become an inferno. In the imperial year, -2005 IC, several Drukai raiding parties were dispatched in secret to the Old World, with the intention of causing as much strife and unrest between the High Elves and Dwarfs as possible. The Dark Elves achieved this by posing as Azure, who were ambushing trading caravans, cheating Dawi merchants out of goods, and razing several smaller settlements to the ground, the most notable of these being Zakbar Varf. This led to tighter strictures on dwarven trade routes, harsher sanctions on elves trespassing into dwarf territory, and ultimately the reckoning of many grudges against the Azure. The High King, Gotrek Starbreaker, stalwartly tried to avert conflict. Unaware of the civil war that had just taken place with Ulthuan, due to the elves' refusal to speak of it, Starbreaker sent messengers to the elves, demanding to know the reason for the attacks, and why the Phoenix King did little to resolve the crisis. The reply was immediate and uncompromising. If Gotrek wanted recompense, he could come to the High Elf capital of Lothern and beg for it. The dwarfs were outraged, but Starbreaker attempted to cool the temper of his kings, and in -1997 IC sent his best ambassadors and reckoners led by Forek Grimbok, to Ulthuan to raise the issue with Celador II, son of Celador the Conqueror. When the envoy arrived, many elves realized how serious the claim was, the Phoenix King's advisors among them. Celador II, however, recklessly denied the charges against him and the Azur, and refused to even investigate the origin of the attacks. When Grimbok demanded, once again, that if the elven court could not discover who of their number was responsible for instigating the unrest, then the court themselves would be held accountable, Celador became uncontrollably angry at Grimbok. Fearing for his reputation, Celador ordered that Grimbok be shaved of his beard and expelled from Ulthuan, gravely insulting him, the High King, and the whole dwarf race by extension. Grimbok returned home, humiliated but with purpose. Starbreaker, upon learning the terrible truth, immediately ordered the forges and armories to begin preparing for war. Grimbok himself later became a slayer due to the shame the incident placed upon him, making the infamous death pact of jihad to atone for his sins. After mustering for almost a year, Darwi throngs marched to war on the elves, drawing troops from the far ends of the dwarven realm. Ironbreakers of Karazakarak marched with Longbeards of Karak Asgal. Slayers from Karak Kadrin marched with Hammerers of Akrund. Upon reaching Toralessi, Gotrek made an oath that he would extract recompense, in gold or in blood, from the High Elves, or he would shave his beard. With a desire to avenge their injured pride, the dwarfs were not about to let their king break his promise. Upon hearing of the assault on Toralessi, Celador was outraged and ordered his generals to send an enormous fleet to relieve the city. The force that left Ulthuan was truly huge, dwarfing any navy before or since, if you pardon the pun, and though the Council of Princes was worried that this would leave their lands undefended, Celador was determined. Elves and dwarfs fought bitterly until, in minus 1974 IC, Celador slew the dwarf prince Snorri Halfhand after Snorri challenged him to single combat. Being tired of slaughter and wishing to reduce their losses, the elves then retreated. Seeking revenge for his cousin's death, Morgrim Baugrim led the forces that pursued the elves. For many years the Azur retreated until they decided to stand and fight at Origor in minus 1968 IC. When the lines met, rivers of blood flowed, and hundreds on each side lost their lives, until Lord Imladric, the prince commanding the High Elf main army, was slain in single combat by Morgrim, and the elves retreated once again, this time leaderless. Morgrim was crowned a hero, and he continued to lay waste to elven towns and cities across the old world, notably razing the city Anethemaria in minus 1948 IC. The heroes Lord Selendor of Tor Akare and Brock Stonefist of Kanak Azul, who had previously fought in many great battles, eventually both lost their lives in the doomed city, crushed by the burning, crumbling towers. The dwarfs were quite unlike any foe that the elves had ever faced, refusing to give up even when doom or defeat was assured for them. The war became a stalemate, the mountain fortresses of the dwarves unassailable, and the Darway laid siege to Toralessi 13 times, unable to penetrate the city's walls. Much of Athaloran was destroyed as the war continued for another 450 years. In the year minus 1560 IC, at the 14th and final siege of Toralessi, later called the Battle of Three Towers. For over 100 days, Darwi engines of war. At the time, the dwarfs had not discovered black powder, bear in mind, attacked the city's mighty walls, and when it proved fruitless, they instead focused upon destroying the finely constructed towers. Eventually, the dwarfs gained entrance to the fortress, and Gotrek finally confronted Kelador at the heart of the city, where the pair dueled for 3 days on end, not stopping or disengaging for a second. Finally, when Kelador began to tire, Starbreaker disarmed him with his superior cardio, broke his sword with the rune axe of Grimnir, and cast the Phoenix King to his knees. Pleading for his life, Kelador swore to surrender and sued for peace. However, Starbreaker not only saw that the king did not intend to keep his oath if his life was spared, but he also knew mercy was not his to give, only justice, and he executed the king on the spot. As a final recompense, demanded so many years ago, Starbreaker took the Phoenix crown from Kelador's head and declared the war to be ended. The remaining Azur briefly considered the impossible task of besieging Karazakarak in order to reclaim the crown, but by this time Malekith's plan had come to fruition, and the Drukai had launched a titanic invasion of Ulthuan, their legions of warriors raising the ancient sunken city of Anlek from the depths of the great ocean. With her armies depleted from the war against the dwarfs, and caught in complete surprise by the Dark Elf's invasion, Ulthuan ordered that every Azur, soldier, civilian and otherwise, retreat from the old world to defend the Azur homeland, whilst warning those that remained on the continent would not be protected by Ulthuan. Although many left, those that felt they had little loyalty to Ulthuan and had gone native chose to remain in their old world colonies and travelled to the forest of Athaloran for protection. These would become the Wood Elves. The dwarfs, although victorious, were left dangerously weakened and unable to successfully combat the Greenskin and Skaven incursions. This weakening allowed the Skaven to unleash a great catastrophe upon the Mountain Kingdoms in what was known by the dwarfs as the Time of Woes. Another Phoenix crown was made to replace the first, which remained in the great treasure hoard of Karazakarak. The fortress of Sith Rianask Namishashir was flooded and dismantled brick by brick in -1502 IC, marking the last result of the betrayal between the elves and dwarfs. Although some, mainly elves, gainsay them, the dwarfs claim to this day that they won the war. Whoever won the war cost both sides hundreds of thousands of lives, along with cities, fortresses, mountains of treasure, and a powerful ally in each other. Neither side ever reached the heights of greatness ever again.
Phenomenal, you wish you